What's up, everyone? My name is Jonathan. I'm the host here at the Venue RX podcast, and I am so excited to be joined today by Kristin Binford. Kristen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Uno, dos, tres.
I'm really excited about this episode. You run a incredibly successful venue yourself, and then you also work as a coach with other venue owners. Do you also coach other wedding vendors, other wedding professionals, or are you just focused on the venue side of things?
Yeah, great question. So, definitely not my expertise to be coaching outside of the venue space. So, I stay in my lane and work exclusively with venue owners.
Okay, amazing. So I want to get right into it and just ask you, how did you get started in the wedding and event space? Like, how did it come about for you to start as a venue owner? Like, how did that even come about?
Yeah, it's kind of a bizarre story to tell you the truth. So, back in 2008, I was working in kind of semi-corporate America I was basically selling high-end business consulting, and that's kind of tough in 2008 when the market crashes, right? And I was young, I wasn't mature enough to handle the stress of that business and that role at that time in my life, and I really just needed something else to dream about. And so our whole family is super entrepreneurial. And so I got this wild hair that we should start business planning to open a winery. So my whole family is actually in agriculture, has an agriculture background, and but growing grapes was not actually something that we knew a lot about. So we took some grape growing classes. We planted some grapes. We have an interesting family story. My great great uncle John actually won a silver medal in the 1904 World's Fair for his wine grapes. So that's a fun part of that kind of idea of where that came from. But my sister ended up getting engaged. We drew a winery, a venue on a napkin in December 2012. 4 months later, her reception was at the venue, and then crazy
Wow.
couples kept calling us just wanting to get married at our place. So
Wow. So you come from kind of an entrepreneurial background, but was this the first actual business that you had started and run other than your corporate experience?
yes, I had spent 13 or 14 years in corporate and semi-corporate America, but this was my first startup.
Okay, amazing. I love that. And I think that's so cool that you have the kind of reference point and the backdrop of the corporate side of things. I feel like our market definitely has so many creatives in it, but I think that it's a really amazing marriage when you have a wedding pro who then takes their experience from corporate America and some of the systems and some of the different um, scalability components of some of those larger corporations and then applies them to our industry. I know I've interviewed Bethel Nathan, who's an officiant here in California, and a couple of other folks as well who have that corporate background. And they've been able to bring those kind of best practices infused with the kind of the heart and the soul of owning your own operation. So I think that's really cool. I want to ask you, you said you started your business in 2014, correct?
Correct.
So during that period of time, that's right after, the whole 2008, 2009 financial crisis. There's a little bit of a recession that happens. After that, obviously, we enter kind of this amazing period of time where we can really see so many businesses starting, so many wedding and event businesses. I know my business actually started in 2014 as well, 2014, 15, right there at the end of 2014. And it just seems like clients were calling and we were just able to build the business organically fairly quickly. Do you feel like that's changed? How do you feel like the industry's really evolved since then?
Yeah, we those of us who I think got into this business around that time, like the demand so far exceeded the supply. Back then there were so few standalone purpose-built ceremony and reception locations. It was really the transition where more and more couples were wanting an all-in-one location, but there wasn't the supply in many markets for kind of those combo locations. So the change has been amazing, quite frankly, since 2014. Back in 2014, there were a few barns, mostly retrofitted older barns that were operating as wedding venues. Since then, in our market, a lot of our most direct competitors now have spent several $1 million building a venue. So there was this. If anybody followed me kind of back over the last several years, I've been talking a lot about we're approaching what's possibly our last best year ever. As venues, there was just so much demand and so little supply, and every year was better and better and better, right? And it's certainly back in 2014 and 2015, I would say it was a lot easier to grow your business than it is today. So 2019, a lot of my message to the marketplace was, guys, it's been easy to grow, but this could be the last best year ever. And a lot of my kind of high volume venue owner friends who had been early to market in 2019, we're starting to see volume start to cut, the number of couples they were booking start to dip just because there were so many new venues opening.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Do you feel so kind of speak to how you feel like the industry is changing? Because there's certainly an influx of new venues, but what about the venues that are going out of business? What about all the cancellations and the reschedulings? And I mean, I've seen so many venues that are choosing, or other maybe wineries, or the Del Mar Fairgrounds here in San Diego, Southern California. They're choosing not to do weddings for a couple of seasons. So now all of a sudden there's this big push. Couples have to find new venues. Are you seeing that in your part of the country as well? Do you feel like that's going to change?
Here's what I expect to happen. I expect to see, especially depending on how the market is impacted in 2021, I expect to see more venues go up for sale. It's quietly happening in a lot of cases behind the scenes. One of my coaching clients actually said something really interesting. She said, Kristen, before I bought a venue, I called all of the venues in my market. My numbers might be just a little wrong here because this is from memory. But she said, I called all of the venues in my market. Do you know how many were willing to sell? 7.
Wow.
None of them were publicly for sale, right? So, I think that there's people who got into this business and it looked like an easy, fun cash cow, and it's not. That hasn't been their experience, is what I would say.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's people who got into this business, built something great, and didn't realize like how locationally stuck you are when you own a building, and that's you don't get to travel the world. Like, it's hard to move, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to move.
Totally.
And so kind of, I could be wrong, but here's my perspective on it. I think we are at the top I think there's going to be some venues that are for sale, quietly for sale. I think we're going to see, especially if we see another round of cancellations, more publicly for sale, more shutdowns potentially, or excuse me, more closures potentially happen. I think that's going to devalue the businesses that are for sale because there's more for sale, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Supply
and I
chain
think,
again.
yeah, exactly. And I think that, the amount of debt that a business has is going to have some impact on that too. 2020 was a lot harder for venue owners who have just a mountain of debt and having to deal with reschedules and having to deal with refunds and having to, you know what I mean? It becomes a lot. So it becomes a lot.
As someone who coaches venue owners, and I'm fascinated to talk to you about this, because we're talking about new venues and we're talking about, maybe older venues. If you're someone who's coming into any market and you're going to say, I'm passionate about this, or maybe you just have this crazy idea that you want to own a wedding venue and you're super naive, right? You've never done anything like this, but you're so excited and you want to do it, right? And I think that's where a lot of our business ideas start. We're like, I could do this, I could do that. There's a need, or you feel like there's a need. What would be your number one piece of advice for a brand new wedding venue owner, never has owned something in the wedding venue space or event space? What do you have, kind of like one big one, like it's going on the poster board?
Can I have 2?
Of
Can I
course. Do 3.
Okay.
If you want to do 3, I love it. Let's 3. What are your top 3?
So number 1 is, so many people get into this business because they want to. And I'm not saying at all that that's not a great reason to get into this business, but extremely closely followed behind that needs to be like, does the market need another venue?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and what is the void? What is the market need? Not just what you want as a person, because what I see so many venues do is build a space that they like, that they want, but they're not their ideal client. Right. So then all of a sudden you find yourself in this position of having to sell what you've got as opposed to giving the market what it needs. So that's like that's kind of my big mission, I would say, in life. The other thing I just have to say is, oh my gosh, You cannot just do this business. Please start with planning and zoning. Like, do not assume that any single piece of property, it is possible to start a wedding venue. The number of venues that have been shut down, who are operating illegally, sometimes they don't even know it. When I get on a potential coaching call with a client, one of the first questions we ask every single person is, are you legal to host weddings? And we ask that question because, number one, I don't want to help somebody grow their business and that they could be shut down. That's going to hurt them. That's going to hurt their couple. So that's one thing. But we also ask that question from a service to the industry perspective, because you'd be surprised. Sometimes new venue owners, the response we get is like, oh yeah, we're out in the country, it'll be fine. It's like, no, 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 no. Like, back up, don't pass go, don't collect $200. You have to find out if this is possible. For context, our original build was an open air pavilion. You could literally walk out 30 foot, one side, no wall, no barriers. And we had to have $100,000 sprinkler system before we could even open our doors. And basically we were a roof, you know what I mean? So the things that people don't know what to look for, but gosh, make sure it's possible. Don't get into a contract on a piece of property if you haven't done your homework.
Do you see a lot of people going and buying properties, or more of your experience and your experience pool with are folks who maybe they had a wonderful piece of land, they've hosted a couple family and friends, maybe a few folks from their church, and then they're like, we could do this more. This is, great. I looked at some of the other wedding venues on the Knot or Wedding Wire, like I could do this. And then they just kind of fall into it that way. Do you see one or the other more?
I'd say it's pretty 50-50. You
Okay.
know, the barriers to entry are lower if you already own the property. But a lot of people who I notice are building like big purpose-built spaces are usually finding a location.
So I guess what I'm hearing is that it might be better to actually hire you prior to even buying the property and buying the building if you're going to go that route, correct? Because then you can help avoid a lot of different pitfalls.
Yeah, so stay tuned for some things coming on
Okay.
that question. But what I would say for now, and hopefully this is appropriate, I have a Facebook group where a lot of these kind of potential venue owner topics are talked about. And I have lots of videos like, don't pass go, don't collect $200, go talk to planning and zoning, even all the way down to, understanding at the county level, like right where we're at. I could throw a rock and hit two other major counties in the St. Louis metro market. Our rules are extremely different between the three counties. So even choosing your location based on the understanding of like how venues operate at a county level can be really important. It can be a competitive advantage or not, quite frankly.
You said something actually in the first time that we actually met on that Clubhouse thing. And by the way, the Facebook groups and everything, we're gonna actually have a little section later where everyone can go find you. All of your links are going to be in the description. So for anyone on YouTube watching this or listening to podcasts, like you're going to want to check this out because Kristen does have so many amazing resources, Facebook groups, obviously coaching, and the content that she puts out is just really cool. But we'll get to that later. But yeah, dropping things like that, we love it. But I was going to say one of the first conversations we had was about zoning and about, I loved that you brought up that there are such huge differences in counties. You could have one county that's, especially during this time, that's totally open and is allowing weddings and events, and then another one right next door that maybe they aren't allowing it, but they aren't enforcing not doing it. And then the other one that is completely open. So really understanding the local feel of how, the city ordinances and everything, county ordinances are going are really, really important. When you say start with zoning, where practically does someone start? Is someone going down to the office, or nowadays, maybe just going online and looking up things? What was kind of like a first step for some folks?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I wish that there was like a perfect path to walk. There's not. The best advice that I can give people if you're serious about getting into this business, reach out to, if you're in the city limits, reach out to the city. If you're not in the city limits, reach out to the county. There could be some state requirements as well. What's dangerous, I think, is sometimes people will call the planning and zoning department and they'll ask the question like, I want to open a wedding venue. What do I need to do? And the person who answers the phone says, oh yeah, there's nothing that you need to do. You're fine. And they take that at face value, right? And that person means well, because maybe there's nothing that you need to do, but there's literally, it takes one complaining neighbor with a deep pocketbook to find something in the code book to argue with you about, and all of a sudden you're so far down this path, you spent $40,000 with an architect or whatever, and now the neighbor found out you're going to do this, and they do not they do not want you to be their neighbor. This is, I would also say, especially true when I notice people buying property. When you're looking for property, people want something beautiful and serene and peaceful, and just reminder, you're moving next to somebody who loves their own beautiful serene and peaceful, right? You may not want noise and drunks and light pollution and all of the things that we potentially bring as venues. So being really mindful that a phone call is great. Get as much in writing as you can. It's a really good idea to have an attorney in the mix in that. And one thing that you said that I think is really interesting, sometimes venue owners or potential venue owners are so happy because there's no rules. And here's what I'll say about that. Did it stink that we had to spend $100,000 on a fire suppression system? Yeah. But what's good about that is it's a barrier to entry. So when you look at markets that have no rules versus markets that have a lot of regulation, what you'll notice is markets that have no rules. So Southwest Missouri is an example of this. Throw a rock and you will hit a wedding venue because they literally don't even have building codes. You can build whatever you want in many areas down there. And so the cost to build is substantially less. Mm-hmm. That sounds great from a venue owner's perspective, right? That also means there's no barriers to entry from 82 other people doing it on the 82 properties next door. So I'm grateful that we're in a more regulated market, both from a safety perspective for our guests, but also just from a barrier to entry perspective and business perspective.
So that sounds like it really drives a decision-making process that you would have towards, if you were working with someone in the planning stage. Hey, Kristen, I want to open a venue, let's do this together. I'm going to pay you X amount, right? And we're going to partner together, and I'd like to help launch this. Would you not necessarily then shy away from more regulated counties, but you might even press in there because it's harder to get in?
Yeah. I mean, you have to be patient. And let me say it this way. So if I'm looking at two counties next to each other, two equal pieces of property, equal distance from population, right? A less regulated county, there may be some benefits for you there because you're competing with people who are in a more regulated county. And you see that in my market. The county just to I think the south of us has less regulation. So it costs less to build there, but they're equal distance from the city. So that's not bad, right? But if you look at a market where there's almost no regulation, you just have to go into it eyes wide open. That means it's easier to get into the business, but it means it's easier to get into the business. So you have no control over it necessarily, but understanding at the county level or at the city level, like what the rules and regs look like, even down, this is a kind of a surprising thing to venue owners sometimes, even down to the, I can't think of the word, the fire district. So we have, I think, 6 different fire districts in our county, and they don't all treat everyone exactly the same. So it's crazy. It's one of the reasons it's one of the reasons why I always tell prospective venue owners, you have to be your best advocate. There is not going to be anybody who is the expert in your market to come give you every answer. You are going to have to be your best advocate.
Got it. I like that. And who are you, just speaking from a practical perspective, is this the venue owner going up and showing up at the fire station or the, fire district office and saying, hey, this is what I want to do, and kind of building some of that rapport? Or are there other things kind of from a macro level that you'd suggest people do to kind of really dive in there?
Yeah. I sometimes people want to skirt the rules and hide under the radar and all that kind of stuff. We'd rather just have the conversation and know, it's just, 100%. I have several examples of venue owners who thought they weren't going to have to do fire suppression, and $150,000 or $200,000 later on top of what their build cost was. And you're already in it. So if the fire chief says you got to have it or you're not opening your doors. It's better to know. And there's never enough slush fund in your budget when you're building a venue. There's just never enough.
And I certainly think that is something that many venue owners probably learned during this time, when, maybe you're looking at your contract, realizing, I don't necessarily have stuff, verbiage in there for a massive pandemic or things like that. And so, refunding people if that's necessary, or rescheduling them. Like, do you have the funds, or are you running really, really tight margins? And that brings me to a question that I'd love for you to kind of confirm or deny. Do you feel like wedding venues make a lot of money? And I'll preface the question with this, that, I think a lot of people get into it. People that I have talked to and heard, and they say, oh my God, there's tons of money in weddings. And, the wedding business is a recession proof business. And everyone always, splurges on their wedding day. So is there really a ton of money in weddings, or not really?
That's a great question. I think that people would be shocked to know how many. I've talked to hundreds of venue owners, like hundreds and hundreds of venue owners. And I think people would be surprised to find out how many people don't pay themselves. And here's why. We, as a part of this market, venue owners have tons of great ideas. But that also leads to this like keeping up with the Joneses
Yeah.
part of this business. Like, oh, and I will say so many venue owners who are established venue owners that I work with. I just had this conversation with somebody yesterday. So they come to me and they're questioning, like, Kristen, do I need to pave my parking lot? Or Kristen, do I need to build a bridal suite? Or like, it's this mentality of things that are going to fix all the problem. If I just add more amenities, that's what's going to make my phone ring. So year after year after year, venue owners are investing major money back into the business, which I'm not opposed to. We've made major improvements to ours as well, but that was supported by demand. That was supported by bookings. It wasn't to solve the problem of how to get more people to book. So are there people making money in this business? Yeah, absolutely. Are there a lot more people than you would expect thinking next year is going to be better? Yeah.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, I've heard that again and again, and I feel like you'd be the perfect person to answer that question for us, just because your exposure to the market. When you think about adding things to your venue, are there some kind of flagship things that you feel like every single venue has to have, or does it depend on your market? I mean, you talked about paving, your parking lot, and I do think that keeping up with the Joneses thing happens. Like, oh, this venue down the road has a gazebo, and they're booked up all the time, or you think so, right? Because
Yeah.
they told you at a networking meeting,
Yeah.
and so you're like, I better put a gazebo. And so that's going to be, X amount of dollars, or we need market lighting in this area or whatever. Are there some things you feel like are absolute must haves, that like that gazebo actually is a good purchase, or what, what are kind of those like fluff pieces maybe?
Oh my goodness. I mean, here's
It's a
what
tough
comes to
question.
mind. Yeah, here's what comes to mind when you ask that question. Sometimes I speak with folks who are marketing themselves as a venue,
Hmm.
but what they really more are, and this is not judgment, but I think it's a delineation in the market. They're marketing themselves as a venue, but what they really are is like a pretty backyard. Now, that does not mean that you can't host beautiful weddings in your beautiful backyard. But when you're a beautiful piece of grass or a beautiful piece of property, and couples have to bring in tables and chairs and a tent and bathroom and everything else, right? Then I think part of the question is, am I a beautiful place to host weddings, or am I a wedding venue? Neither one is wrong, right?
Hmm.
So that's one like break or one spot that I notice in the industry. In terms of what do you have to have, I think from a practical perspective, people want to have a rain plan. Like really, like how are you going to host events? That's a little bit dependent on what market that you're in.
Absolutely.
I find it hard for venues to not own tables and chairs. Some don't. It's not impossible, but especially if you get into like double and triple header weekends, just functionally that's harder. In terms of anything in addition to, I mean, bathrooms,
Bathrooms, yeah.
right? I mean, there's just
Some of the
outside of
basic
that, I
things.
would say there's a lot of like fluff, nice to have stuff, but um, good good lighting. That's
Mhm.
probably like a good basic one that venue owners don't think about.
For your
Is how,
photo, video, just safety, everything. Absolutely.
yeah. So, but outside of that, it's a whole lot of nice to haves as opposed to have to haves.
Hmm. Very cool. I like that you made the distinction between the pretty backyard and the wedding venue. And again, not said disrespectfully to
No.
anyone, right? Just with the property that people have, but I definitely can relate to what you said about, in 2014 and kind of on, you start to see a lot of different people. The barriers to entry seem pretty low. It seems like this is going to be a great, cash cow of a business, and everyone wants to just jump right in, like you said, and pass go and collect $200. But, and we had in our market here in San Diego, we were doing staffing at the time, just getting our staffing company running. And so we would work at all these different venues. And it seemed like every other week we were being sent to a new venue that was basically just a beautiful piece of grass,
Yeah.
with like a nice view, and people were bringing in chairs and tables, and there was this very like curated type of experience that people wanted. That brings me to my next question, which, do you think that the wedding venue industry, there was this huge push obviously towards, I think, blank canvas and like really, really getting very creative with your vendors and with everything else, and maybe a move away from the traditional banquet hall style of weddings? Do you feel like that's coming back, and like the packages and the all-inclusive type stuff? Do you think that's coming back more as people look to, you know, do less, like work less on their wedding, especially with everything that's happened? Or do you think we're still going to see a lot of, you know, I don't want to say DIY because it's not really DIY, but it's working with this incredible team of vendors from all over the place to create a wedding that is very much only your own, right? Not
Yeah.
template at all.
Yeah. Even when that, how do I reflect on that? I think that what is absent in that conversation so often about like this idea of blank canvas. So sometimes I see venues market or promote themselves as a blank canvas, and there is absolutely a market for that. Right. If you think about the beautiful property in California where you're at, and the luxury vendors, and bring it all in and it's a curated experience, that is a different market than St. Louis, Missouri. I have a pretty backyard, and my ideal client is spending $10,000 on their total wedding. Do you know what I mean? Like they're just
Yeah.
kind of apples and oranges. And I just totally lost track of your question. Would you try
No,
for me?
yeah, of course, of course. So I was just asking basically the difference between the venue that caters more to a blank canvas style versus a venue that's going to be all inclusive. I was saying trending wise, do you feel like this market is going to move back towards more of that predominance of all inclusive style venues, or are we still going to see a plethora of these just blank canvases where you bring in everything?
That's a great question, and I don't know the answer. I
Totally.
really don't. I think that there's a market need for all inclusive, and there's a lot of venue owners who don't want to own the whole piece of the puzzle and don't want to figure out how to be responsible for all of it if they
Totally.
are all inclusive. Like, hey, the DJ didn't show up. Guess who's going to be the DJ today? You. You know what I mean? Like,
Where are
you
your wash
signed
lights?
yourself up for
Get
this,
some
right?
strobes.
Exactly.
Yep, I'm with you. So, with when you work with your venue owners, then are you encouraging them to take on more responsibility? Bring in more lighting, bring in tables and chairs, and give some design options, or do you like the venue style? And this is really more of a personal question. Do you like more of the venue style where that is all being brought in from incredible rental companies, and the DJs are upselling with up lights and different things? Do you like one versus the other?
I like to give the market what it needs. So the short answer is no. To me, it's an evaluation of what's available in the market,
Mhm.
what part of the market is being underserved, and I like to give the market what it needs as opposed to what I think or what I want.
Yeah. No, I love that. That makes total sense. I had questions about service, and just your perspective on service as a venue owner. Before we do that though, I'd love to hear, as you were building your business, were there some things that you learned? Were there some mistakes you made, some like big oopsies, and this is the section of the show that we affectionately call Left at the Altar. What for you were maybe some big mistakes that hindsight's 2020, obviously, that you feel like you are able to pass on to some of the folks that you work with to help them avoid those similar mistakes?
Yeah, probably one of my favorite ones to talk about is so our first season, we did 19 weddings. That was what we considered sold out. That was as much fun as we wanted to have, just Saturdays. And then we quickly got into double headers and then triple headers. And probably one of the biggest mistakes that I made was when we brought on early team members. Guys, I didn't know what I didn't know either. Like, I'm so far from perfect. We've made plenty of mistakes. But we brought people onto the team that we already know, liked, and trusted, and we knew would take great care of our couples, and they did. The mistake that I made was not setting the expectation that we are going to, over time, develop an approach to business that is our approach to business, right? We're going to develop a way that we flip at the end of the night, that we close down at the end of the night, that we get ready for the wedding the next day. All of these pieces that like you have to have if you're a high volume venue that really wants to have great 5-star reviews and couples that love you. You've got to be able to build consistency into the business. So the mistake that I made was not really setting that expectation with some of those early team members who have fabulous ideas. And one of the things I love the most about this business is really getting to be the kind of leader that I don't have to be the smartest person in the room. I want my team to bring ideas to the table. I want them to help make the business better. And I didn't set the expectation that like eventually we're all going to get onto the same approach. And I think that was a little bit hard because in hindsight, it was hard to have that conversation. And I'm not one to shy away from tough conversations, but you appreciate people and they really have added so much to the team. And the challenge is, well, you've been doing it that way, but I really need you to do it this way, but you really like it your way. You know, if we would have just set the expectation up front that like, hey, things are going to change and we are going to have a consistent approach to the business and we all need to be on that same page, some things would have been easier.
Totally. Sounds like those systems, if you kind of started with a systems first approach,
Yes.
do you feel like that enables a venue to focus more on the customer experience and the service when you don't have to think about kind of the steps?
100%. Yes. So many venue owners come to me, so many of the clients that I've had. So I work with folks who are brand new venues, but I also have worked with a lot of like venues opening second locations or high volume venues, people who just love their business, have tons of bookings, but don't have time. And so often people come into that conversation and they really think they need staff. And you need a great team. You can't do 100 weddings a year by yourself. And you have to have the systems and processes in place to make your staff members be able to give that really great, consistent service and allow them to lead the day so that you don't have to be there at every wedding. So it takes both.
It really,
cart before the horse.
And it really sounds like you've done that because you said in the beginning, you couldn't build a business the way that you feel like other people have built it just because you had personal responsibilities on the family side of things that you couldn't be there for every single wedding. And especially as you started scaling up, it was completely, impossible. So do you feel like that is the most value that you're able to add to your clients, kind of helping them get the business squarely off their back, working 80, 100 hours, never feeling like there's enough money coming in or, for the work that they're doing?
Yeah, it's a combination of both. Like a ton of my clients would say, like they were going nuts in my graduates group yesterday about we've tripled our business and all these booking type of goals. And then the backside of that is like, but I get to have fun. Like I got to go to my kids' baseball game on Saturday. I actually went on a vacation and took my management team with me, or I took my venue manager with me. And so that's the fun stuff. And that's where I really get excited. And it got to come from the place of I couldn't build it the same way. And because of that, it gives me the time to coach. Like so many venue owners, let me say it that way, have built the business on their back. Well, they did. Well, I didn't. I had a different approach. So that's also given me kind of the blueprint that's worked, but also the time to be able to do it because I want to pour into my venue owners too. It's got to be both. My couples.
Absolutely. I'm curious. We have this new section of the show called OMG, right? With the couples, and you can actually share. I'm totally fine if you want to share experiences that you've heard about from your clients, even the coaching clients. If you don't want to go that close to home, but Was there, were there any moments, think of something, my gosh, it could be scandalous. It could be just like, what is happening from a disorganization standpoint? What is kind of like an OMG moment for you?
You just opened it up for me with my clients. I'm trying to think if they have any interesting OMG moments. Okay, I have one or two. One was close to home,
Okay.
or both probably close to home. So one OMG moment, if you're a venue owner and you don't have a backup generator, like this one's for you. An OMG moment was I knew there would be a day that the power went out. But in my mind, this was going to be 10 p.m. The party was almost over. It'd be fine. Like we have a plan, we have a plan in place, but it would be fine. We blew a generator. It was 95 degrees outside, and it was 30 minutes before the ceremony started. OMG. Like in my mind, this is going to be on, you know what I mean, at 10:30 at night, no big deal.
Wrapping up, all good. Wow.
So God bless them. I the DJ was there, and we have like it's called a tailgater. It's like a good quality backup boombox, Bluetooth. And I lovingly said to the DJ, like, hey, we are starting the ceremony on time. Make it work. And he did, like made it work. And so probably the best thing that I did that I thought if there was ever going to be a time that we didn't get a good review, it was going to be that wedding, right? Because 95 degrees outside, you blow a transfer, it's a big deal. So I stood up before the ceremony. We have a fireplace, and I'm 5 foot tall. I look like a big person, but I'm not a very big person. I stood up on the fireplace and I said, hey, everybody, my name's Kristen. I'm the owner here at Haw Valley. We are so excited to have you for this event today. We're going to have a great time. We're going to start on time. Like, this is what's happening. And I communicated, and everybody was great. And then we put steps in place, and we did get a generator there within an hour, and it was great. It was a lovely event, but that was like a OMG kind of moment for sure.
Oh my goodness. That is nuts. We've lost power only once, fortunately, knock on wood, but it was during a time where dinner was happening. And fortunately there was a ton of uplighting operated by those little can lights that have batteries. And they actually thought that we turned the lights down because and unfortunately a couple of people did notice, but for the majority of the guests, they were like, ooh, this is nice, like mood lighting. Meanwhile, in the back, we're like running around with flashlights, okay, where's the the power box, what are we doing, how are we figuring this out, just trying to problem solve. And like Trishan came out miraculously in like 10 minutes. We hadn't been able to get a hold of this guy, like crazy stuff. Such fun operating venues.
Yeah.
All right, well, I feel like we could go on, and I'm really actually excited to go into service, but I think that we should wrap it up for now. And we might have to have you come back on if you're open, because I think that there's so much that the community needs to know about scaling from the perspective of teams, and how do you consistently provide that customer service that is going to give you those 5-star reviews, and keep people coming back and referring your venue. And I'm curious how you think about that. And there's so much also that we could talk about with marketing. But for anyone who's watching this on YouTube, or who's listening to this online, you're going to have to check out Kristen. So Kristen, where do folks find you if they're looking online?
Yeah, so KristinBinford.com. There's no E's in my name. It's all I's. So KristinBinford.com, or I have a community on Facebook that is building and running a profitable wedding venue that is for new venue owners and established venue owners, or prospective venue owners. So that's where you can find me.
Awesome. And then Kristen, you're also pretty active on Clubhouse, which is kind of the new hot thing. And hopefully it just continues blowing up, and we're early adopters here. But yeah, Kristen is incredible on that app. So if you're on there, check her out as well. She runs, do you have a club? Are you a part of a club?
Yeah, so two things. So the Wedding Pros Club is an awesome club that's been started. I think it's the fastest growing club in the wedding industry on Clubhouse. So finding lots of great people there. I'm excited to have you over there with me as well. And we're doing a weekly venue owner kind of meetup at 12:30 Central Standard Time on Mondays on Clubhouse. And then my username on Clubhouse is @weddingvenue. which I'm actually kind of pumped about.
I am so pumped for you. I saw that both on Instagram and on Clubhouse, and I'm like, Kristen is, from the marketing perspective, she knows her stuff. I mean, she is in. She grabbed that. That was amazing. I love it. Good stuff. Well, Kristen, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing with us your wisdom and insight over the years you've been in business. And I'm excited possibly to have you back on, do a part 2, and delve into service. But thank you for coming.
This is so much fun. I think we could talk all day. So I really appreciate it.
Oh, 100%. All right. Have a good day.